There's a boy who rides the last train on my line. Don't let him sit next to you. I've been going to my parents' most weekends for 12 years now. Every time I take the same line, at the same station. On Saturdays, the last train is the 107. I usually go during the day, but sometimes work runs over, and I take a later train. One night on the first year I started making the trips, I ran down the stairs two at a time, went over on my ankle halfway, and got to the platform just in time to watch the door shut in front of me. The clock above the platform said 108. Well, guess I'd see my parents next week. I sat on the bench to take a breather, then ate the rest of the tuna baguette I'd saved from dinner. The station was completely empty now, and so silent you could hear the vending machine humming two platforms over. Then I heard a train coming. I looked up at the clock. It said 113. Didn't the last one leave at 107? At least that's what the timetable said. I glanced at the train again as it came closer. It had the right destination on the front, so I decided not to overthink it and got on. The carriage looked normal with the usual scratched floor and an advert for a solicitor's firm that does injury claims. Seats were arranged in pairs either side of the aisle. There were only 4 or 5 other passengers, all on their own and sitting spread out. I sat in an empty seat in the middle and we pulled away. A few stops later, the door at the end of the carriage slid open and a teenager came through, looked 16 or 17, and was wearing big over-ear headphones, black hoodie with the hood up. He came halfway along the aisle and sat down next to a man in one of the double seats, a man in his 30s, scrolling his phone. Then the man looked up from his phone at the teenager in absolute horror. I've only ever seen a face make that expression in horror movies. He made a noise like he'd been winded, and he got up so fast he cracked his shoulder off the pole and half went down into the aisle. When he got to the doors, he stood with both hands flat against the glass, waiting desperately for them to open. When they opened at the next stop, he went out so hard he landed on his hands and knees on the platform. He got some odd looks from the few other passengers in the carriage, but nobody said anything. The teenager hadn't seemed to have noticed. I just assumed he must have been on something and got off 4 stops later. That was 12 years ago, and other than telling my parents about it at breakfast, I didn't think about it again. Last Saturday, I was down the road from the station at 1:10, which meant I'd already missed it again, for the first time in 12 years. I nearly turned round and went home. Right then, I remembered the other train. I went down, mostly to prove to myself I'd made it up, and sat on the same bench to wait. 1:11 on the clock, then 1:13, then the train. The doors slid open. This time there was an announcement as I stepped on. A woman's flat, recorded voice. For your safety, passengers are reminded to sit alone. Please do not sit beside another passenger. I figured it was some leftover post-pandemic rule, but the wording was so absurdly blunt that I actually laughed. It was basically the train announcing what everyone who's ever taken public transport has always wanted. Please, for the love of God, don't sit next to me. I looked around. As instructed, everyone was sitting alone, and there were more than enough empty seats. I sat by myself, and the train started moving. Then the doors at the far end of the carriage opened, and a teenager stepped